Street photography has been approached in many ways before it was even labeled such a thing. And even today, the term street photography is a blanket term that maybe isn't really the right word to describe what we all do. Ultimately, we are all photographing life as we see it. And so there has never been one approach to this, one style, one method to this genre of photography. An artist can of course have their own intentions and message for their work, but like any art form, art is subjective. At the end of the day, it's really up to the interpretation of the viewer to come to their own conclusions of what the work means and feels to them. For a long time, I struggled as a photographer trying to find where I stood in terms of what I wanted to create. I love documentary style photography, especially photographing protests and other events surrounding whatever the social climate was, and I enjoy photographing people, showing their faces and their emotions from time to time. But I also love to create things that are more subjective, less straightforward, and more abstract, where people aren't clearly depicted. This love for all sorts of styles and approaches put me in quite a predicament, as I didn't really feel like I was fully immersed in either, or if I felt like I was, I would push myself towards the other approach. I was kind of stuck in the middle. However, this made me realize how split street photography is in terms of philosophy, mindset, and even community in a way, because, people who believe and shoot in one way will gravitate towards others who think similarly. So you end up having these different tables in the cafeteria. And just like how I was in middle school and high school, I would bounce between every table trying to be everyone's friend. And what did that get me? I'm a full-time YouTuber with no social life. Okay, to put it quite generally, there's really two approaches to street photography. A candid, documentary-style driven approach, and a more aesthetic-driven, fine art approach. Although I don't really like that term, fine art. For the sake of this video, let's just call it documentary street and fine art street, with both being the two far ends of the spectrum. You could say I probably fall right here, somewhere in the middle, leaning more towards the fine art side. But where I struggled was my joy for shooting both ways, and feeling like I couldn't for some reason. And just talking about that now, it's kind of silly. Thinking I couldn't shoot and share work that was different than what I've shared in the past, just because I was afraid of what people might think. But I get the sense that this isn't an uncommon issue and that many people probably feel the same way. Social media, Instagram specifically, with everyone's highly curated feeds, creates this feeling that you need to find a lane and stick to it. Otherwise, you get the idea in your mind that you're just this jack of all trades photographer with no particular style. At a certain point, I started to post all sorts of different types of photography that I was into, and I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine very, very long time ago. And somewhere in the conversation, we decided to give each other constructive feedback, some criticism of each other's work. And what he told me about my work then was that whenever he saw one of my posts online, he didn't always know it was me right away. Only until he saw my username did he realize, oh, it's Faizal. It's a pleasant surprise. At that time, I wasn't really interested in formulating a particular look or style in my work. I was just fascinated with photography, and I was exploring all these different subject matter and ways of shooting. I was experimenting, trying new things, and honestly, that's what I should have been doing anyway. And while my friend's words were honest and not unsolicited, it did end up making me look at my photography quite differently. Actually, if we're being honest, it made me look at my work a bit negatively, which it shouldn't have. All of a sudden, I felt like I was doing all of this wrong. Having never gone to school for photography or any proper art school, I never really had a situation where I was able to get constructive feedback on my work. When you grow up in a social media environment, you become very comfortable with praise. Rarely do you get the chance to actually hear someone's criticism and their honest thoughts. And when you do for the first time, it can hit you sideways. Speaking of which, there's this trend I'm seeing on everyone's Instagram stories lately, where everyone's asking ChatGPT to roast their photography. So I thought I'd give it a go. No personality, these images could belong to anyone. Oh, okay. Didn't expect that. Before we continue, I want to take a quick moment to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Building out your own visual portfolio online in the form of a website is a great exercise in curating your own work. It lets you experiment with showcasing select works, different styles, without the pressure of social media. Squarespace makes it really easy to creatively display your work however you please, and you don't need to have any clue of how to code a website. Believe me. Their templates help so much in getting you off to a great start. If this sounds interesting to you, you can visit squarespace.com/Faizal and use the code Faizal at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase. Gary Winogrand once famously said, "When I'm photographing, I see life." So how does one find a particular style when they are interested in photographing so many different things? I've talked in recent videos about how much focal length influences our approach and our style of street photography. For example, you're much more inclined to shoot in the more documentary style approach with a wider focal length, and you're more likely to take the fine art approach with a longer lens. Or at least this is how I see it. My joy for using a 50mm lens perfectly encapsulates where I stand in all of this. In the middle, not quite wide, not quite a telephoto. Somewhere in between so I can bounce back and forth. But if I'm being honest, I think it really has helped me hone down an approach that blends the things I like about both styles. I can have people in my frame have their emotions, facial expressions visible if I want, and I can include parts of my environment to create something that's more abstract. I'm trying to find something that blends both together to create a style of my own that is the middle, if that makes any sense. And over time, I've just grown to care less about what others might think about my work. I think a lot of it is thanks to being so open to what my approach is like on YouTube and reading some great YouTube comments. It's really built a thicker skin for myself. So I thank you, haters. Part of being an artist or a photographer specifically is to share with the world how you see and perceive things. Photography is the chosen medium, and it's only natural as a photographer, as an observer, as someone who takes in inspiration, to have your perspective change over time. What interests you today may not be the same as what interested you a year ago. And there's a good chance it won't be the same a year from now. Coming to terms with this idea that I'm in the middle of a journey, not at the end, has helped a lot in the idea of feeling like I'm stuck in the middle. I'm not stuck in the middle. I'm in the middle, because that's where I'm at in my journey. I'm only 27. I shouldn't have to have everything figured out at this point. No one should. I hope this helps you.